Well, as you can see, it's that time of year again when you've got to shift into winter driving mode. I'm going to give you a few tips and pointers on just how to do that, how to drive safely, what you should have with you, everything you'll need to know to get prepared to go on the road. In this video, we'll go over all those tips so you can handle winter like a pro. One of the first things you're going to need to be prepared for winter is carrying extra heavy winter clothing in the truck with you. And some of the most important things you'll need are extra socks, really heavy winter extra socks, good work gloves that I've lost, good heavy lined work gloves, a heavy sweater, and a good quality hat. Got my Canadian trucker hat here. It looks goofy as hell, but it's warm, and that's the point. Some of the other essential equipment that you should carry with you: small tool kit with just the various basic tools, but particularly a filter wrench and a spare set of fuel filters. Lots of windshield washer fluid, an extra jug of coolant for the rad. Now I carry methyl hydrate as well as fuel conditioner because sometimes fuel conditioner is good, but sometimes it just isn't going to cut it. And on those really cold days, you may need a little methyl hydrate, and it'll work for the airlines too, so it's a handy thing to have. I also carry power steering fluid because the seals tend to weep and crack in the wintertime, and they'll seep in California. If running in California, they'll get you in trouble for that. Just some regular lubricant like WD-40 and some lock deicer, of course, because part of the thing you should be doing is keeping the salt off your truck. So you've got to have that power washed off and get rid of the extra snow buildup and stuff. But then after you've washed it, you've got to be able to coat the locks and the door handles with de-icer so they don't freeze and lock you out of the truck when you're in having dinner or something like that. Something else you want to carry is one of these little portable snow shovels. You'd be surprised how handy they can be. Just even to dig yourself out of the truck stop parking lot sometimes in the morning. Dig yourself enough of a track you can get the wheels rolling. They're just little collapsible things, but they're handy as hell sometimes. These days, with the really crap diesel fuel that they put out, this low sulfur emissions diesel fuel, the stuff gels really easy. So every time I fuel in the wintertime like this, I add fuel conditioner. A little jug of this each side helps keep the truck running. It's important that you prepare the truck as well. In the wintertime, or before winter sets in actually, we won't be taking this off. I like to install new batteries every fall and make sure all the connections are tight and cleaned off, and that way you won't end up sitting in a parking lot cranking over and then having the batteries die on you and be stuck to suffer it out in the cold. New batteries charged right up, very important. And something else that's important is the air dryer system, because moisture gets into the air lines and freezes, and then you've got some real problems. So I like to change the filter and have the system serviced every fall, and drain the air tanks as well every time you stop to get the moisture out of them. Something else that's very important are to have proper drive tires on in the winter. Not trailer tires, but ones with lugs to grip the snow and help you climb those hills. It's also important because the temperature drops, your tire pressure will drop. The colder it gets, the more it'll lose tire pressure. So you've got to keep up with the tire pressure. Keep an eye on that, check them, when they're cold, usually in the morning before you set out on the highway, you'll get the best reading, but it is important to keep them properly inflated, or they'll wear funny and you'll be replacing them early. If you carry tire chains, be sure they're in good repair before the winter sets in. Make sure you know how to install them, and make sure you check the areas where you're going to be running to find out their specific requirements for the amount of chains that you'll need. Something else I'm a big believer in, and it'll cost you a few $100, but get yourself a good heavy quality sleeping bag. This one here is rated for -60, and it's actually one sleeping bag within another. It's very warm, well worth the money. You can shut the truck off and not run it all night and sleep quite comfortably in that sleeping bag. And I never run my truck in the winter. I don't like to idle it anyway. But a sleeping bag like that, a great investment. And if you break down, handy as hell. Winter driving is completely different than driving any other time of the year if you're running in snow like we do up here. There are a few things you've just got to remember that'll save your skin. The first thing is you've got to slow down. The speed limit signs mean nothing. Just because it says 55 miles an hour does not mean that not necessarily you should be doing 55 miles an hour. You should be driving under the limit. Something else you should be doing is leaving just a ton of room around the truck, especially out front of the truck. Because 9 times out of 10, if you get in trouble in the winter in a truck, it's not the weather that's causing the problem, it's the four-wheelers around you. Someone will spin out in front of you or turn it sideways or cut you off or something like that. The four-wheelers are your biggest danger any time of year, but particularly in the winter. So you don't want them hanging around you. If you're running slower, they'll tend to get by you and they won't bunch up behind you and beside you and stuff like that. You want them well away from you. So go a little slower, let them go by, make sure you've got a ton of room out front of the truck. Something else you don't want to do is pull over on the shoulder of the road this time of year because you can't really tell what the shoulder's like. It may look like it's flat snow and flat ground underneath, but all sorts of times there can be a big ditch under there that you just can't see. And by the time you find out there is a ditch there, it's too late and you're stuck or on your side. So don't be pulling off on the side of the road. Wait for the rest areas and the truck stops to pull off. In the wintertime, visibility is often a problem. Low-lying clouds, snow blowing at you. And there's another good reason to slow down, especially at night, because you just can't see as far up the road as you can on a nice sunny day or an evening. So keep your mirrors clear. Make sure you keep your defroster on, at least slightly anyway, to keep the glass clear. Make sure you've got good wiper blades and they're functioning before you leave. It's very important to keep your mirrors clean as well, even your side glass, so you can see what's coming up beside you. So every time you stop, it's a good practice to clean all the glass off, because it's amazing how quickly it will plug up and fog up and get cluttered with dirt. When I'm climbing a hill in the wintertime, I like to keep my RPMs near the higher range, so that way if she's climbing and she wipes her feet, it'll only skip a couple hundred RPM. But if you're chugging up the hill at 1300 and she wipes her feet, you can get 600 RPM revolution out of the wheels. Then you've spun the wheels, then you're in trouble, because then you can't find your traction again often sometimes. So I like to climb at, about 1900 really, as long as it's not too hard and too long, just so I don't wipe my feet too hard and carve too big a revolution with the drives. There will be times through the winter, depending on which climate you're in and what state, that you'll encounter glare ice or black ice or whatever you want to call it. There is no safe way to drive on this stuff. The moment you sense that the road is turning to ice, find the nearest spot to get off. And this truck here, most trucks now, have a temperature gauge that shows the outside air temperature. Watch that gauge like a hawk, and it'll tell you when the rain is starting to turn to ice just by watching the temperature. Don't even try to drive in it. Take your feet off the pedals and just steer and try to get off into a safe parking place where nobody will ram you from behind. Now, you'll hear a lot of guys say that they don't use the Jake in the wintertime. Up here in Canada, we use it all the time. Now, we don't use it on glare ice or black ice because nothing works on ice. But other than that, in the wintertime, it's often the best way to slow the truck down because it won't lock or drag the wheels. It's hard to tell with brake pressure, but if you use the Jake to slow the truck down, you'll set yourself into a steady rhythm. And remember, it's got 3 positions too. It's got a high, medium, and a low. And if you feel like it's going to grab too much in high, just bump it down a setting. Jake is a great tool to use in the snow in the wintertime. Finally, you need to remember to pay attention to what you're doing all the time. You've got to be totally focused on the road, especially in the winter. So set down the cell phone and just forget about it. Okay, so we're going to drive it like we're driving Miss Daisy. We're going to keep a ton of room around the truck. And finally, don't let your dispatcher be the boss of when you go and when you stay and sit. You are the boss. You are captain of this ship. You're driving the truck. You'll be the one that's held responsible if you're in an accident. So don't let the dispatcher dictate your schedule. You yourself have to decide when the roads are safe to go and when they're not, you should be landing into a safe haven. And pay attention. Leave the cell phone alone. Keep your head in the game. Total focus, and that way you'll get there and keep the rubber side down.